Chapter 8. There's something wrong, isn't there? Jenni said to him as soon as he came in through the front door of the flat. What makes you say that? Martin replied, putting his bag down and going into the kitchen to make himself a cup of coffee. Jenni followed him in. Martin? Yes? Don't you know that families are always more or less unsatisfactory? Where'd you get that from? Experience. You're just out of practice, that's all. He filled the filter paper full of coffee and turned the machine on. Thanks for bringing the car back in time, Jenni continued. I've got to go to Putney tonight. It's Josie's birthday. Want to come? Josie had been Jenni's best friend ever since they'd been in university together in Durham years ago. No thanks, Martin said, watching the coffee drip into the carafe. I need to think. What about? Family? Money? Join the club, Jenni said. Then she left him to wait for his coffee. The next day, Martin phoned Merlin Griffiths, who told him that the cut-ins about his aunt's murder were in the post. The solicitor also reminded him that he'd spoken to his Uncle Paul after Martin's appointment with him, and that there was money if he needed it. Despite himself, it did make him feel better to know that there was some backup if necessary. Then he called the garage around the corner where he usually took the Land Rover for repairs. It had to fit a new ignition switch and coil, and he told them to check the brakes and replace the tyres if necessary. Something had changed in him. It was as if he was being deliberately less careful about money because he knew that he couldn't go into the future without facing some neglected aspects of his past. By the time the post arrived the following morning, he'd done his share of cleaning up the flat, finished his laundry, and began to repack the large green holdall that he usually used when going on a trip. Then he'd gone and picked up the repaired Land Rover and filled it with diesel. Should be all right now, Martin, Joe the mechanic said as he accompanied him onto the forecourt where the pumps were. But you were right about tyres. I replaced 2 of them at the back. If you ever change your mind about selling it, let me know. Martin nodded and thanked him for the work he'd done. Joe knew that he had no intention of selling the Land Rover, but he always tried. He got in and started it up. It was a Series 2A from the mid-60s, and the only thing he'd rescued from Plas Wern Las all those years ago. On his last visit to the house, just before he'd gone to university, he'd found it mouldering away in the garage and had it fixed up. One way or another, he'd managed to keep it going ever since. Now, it seemed right that this was the vehicle in which he intended to return. When he got back to the flat, there was a padded envelope lying on the mat. He opened it just to check that it actually did contain the cuttings that Merlin Griffiths had promised, then carried it into the kitchen, where he wrote a quick note to Jenni and Jonathan, his other flatmate, and told them that he'd be away for another few days. He didn't tell them why he was going back so soon. He couldn't exactly explain it to himself. It just seemed unavoidable. Then he went back out to the Land Rover and started out for Plas Wern Las for the first time in many years.